Assalamualaikum and hi, my name is Shaina Roshaizat, matrix number 271985, and I'll be presenting the introduction and the conclusion part of this assignment. So for the introduction, neoclassical school facts, as we all know, there are no 5 major questions, but they are extensions of economic theory by neoclassical schools. The first one is value theory. The second one is monetary economics, and last but not least is the imperfect competition. So neoclassical economic theory is grounded in the rejection of the Martian notion of exploitation and the promotion of the idea that the distribution of social resources produced by the market exchanges is innately fair. Though neoclassical theory is a domain economic discipline, but it is also actually a psychological theory. In neoclassical economic theory, there are 3 extensions of economic analysis as compared to earlier classical and marginalist, as I've mentioned earlier before in the earlier slide. So number 1, the value theory. Neoclassical economists stress both demand and supply in determining the market prices of goods, services, and resources. The second one, monetary economics. Monetary economics is one of the branch of economics that studies the money stock and its repercussion on the economy. Several of the neoclassical economists took a far greater interest in the role of money in the economy than did the early marginalists. Virtually all market transaction involves money in monetary economy. It has both. It also has both microeconomics and macroeconomics aspects. This part will focus on the contribution of Wicksell and Fisher as monetary economists in neoclassical school. Okay, the third one is imperfect competition. Neoclassical model assumes industries are perfectly competitive, exhibit constant returns to scale and sell homogeneous goods. Neoclassical economists standard marginal analysis to market structures other than pure competition, pure monopoly, and duopoly. The simplest imperfectly competitive market structure is that of a pure monopoly. A market is in which a firm faces no competition. So this assignment will focus on the contribution of Chamberlin and Robinson in imperfect competition theory in neoclassical school.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Firstly, let me introduce myself first. My name is Aminuddin bin Abdul Halim. My matric number is 27088. So today I will present about the neoclassical school in monetary economy, which is by John Grustav, Knut, Wicksell. So as an introduction, I will explain a little bit about Wicksell biography. Wicksell was born in Stockholm, Sweden. He undergraduated at the University of Uppsala. He obtained a modest government subsidy in 1896 to begin his monetary studies in Berlin. He also active in the philosophical, political, and literary debates and activities of student circles. As we all know, Wicksell have made several major contributions to economics. As an example, the contribution that has been contributed by Wicksell is an analysis of the role of interest rate in achieving an equilibrium price level. Second, recognition of the potential contribution of the government and the central bank. And the last one is an early statement of the saving investment approach to macroeconomic equilibrium. Now we move to the next slide, which is price level change. To Wicksell, monetary theory turn on one main question, which is why do prices collectively rise or fall? So to answer this question, he turned on analysis of natural rate of business and bank rate. Okay, now I will explain about natural rate of business first, and then I will continue with bank rate. The normal or natural rate of business based on Wicksell is uh, he said that the natural rate of business is depend on supply and demand for real capital that is not yet invested. The supply of capital flows from those who postpone consuming part of their income and thereby accumulate wealth. Second, a natural rate of interest applies only to credit between individuals. However, complicated matters because unlike private persons, um, they are not restricted to their own fund in their lending or even to their fund in their lending or even to the fund placed at their disposal by savers. And the last one is the interaction of supply and demand that determines the natural interest rate. In this situation, if the prospect of the employment of capital become more promising, demand will increase and quantity demanded will first exceed quantity supplied. Now we move to the next analysis, which is bank rate. First situation is bank rate is bigger than natural rate. If the bank rate is bigger than natural rate, price will decrease because saving will increase. And at the same time, investment spending will decrease because people are more save their money. This situation will make national income will decrease. If this situation happen, price of consumers and also general price become decrease. In other words, deflation will be occurs. Now we move to the next situation, which is bank rate is below the natural rate. If the bank rate is below the natural rate, saving will be decreased while price will increase. The demand for goods and services will increase because the people are less saving in their money. If this situation happen, market price equilibrium will change, and as an conclusion in this situation, if the bank rate is below the natural rate, price will rise because bank rate is below the natural rate. Now we move to the next slide, which is implication of the public policy. Wicksell analysis of interest and his predilection for reform led him to push the government and central bank rules in stabilize the economy. Wicksell has been the first economist to advocate stabilizing wholesale price by controlling discount and interest rate. Second implication is people try to rush the investment when the demand is rise, but it takes a long time of period to improve the output. Other than that, the next implication is Wicksell asked the bank to set the interest rate that not rise or lower than the commodity price. And the last implication is the age of free gold coin must be hung, and the world will replace two paper standard so that the currency does not inflate cost of rising of gold output. Now we move to the next slide, which is for saving. We shall we shall analyze the theory of for saving. We shall hypothesize a case in which a new enterprise was financed through bank loan. Through a bank loan, pure credit creation without a corresponding accumulation of real capital. Assuming full employment at the outset, more land and labor will be employed in producing capital good than if there were no credit creation to finance a new enterprise, leaving credit available for turning out consumer goods. Next, the demand for article of consumption will increase, then diminish because entrepreneur will bid up the price of land as they expand their investment. Entrepreneur also will acquire fewer capital goods than they originally contemplated. At the same time, consumption will be restricted as price rose. The real saving which is necessary for the period of investment to increase in fact and force. Now we move to the last slide, which is imperfect comparison. We shall recognize the inequivalency of the purely competitive model in retail market. Thus, anticipating by several decades the theory of monopolistic or imperfect comparison. Other than that, Wicksell also wrote that retailers usually have fit circle of customer, and Wicksell also said that rise in price reduce the quantity of goods demanded. I think that's all from me. I will pass to the next presenter. Thank you.
Hi, Assalamualaikum. My name is Nashifa Awanis binti Ahmad and my matric number is 272736. Now I'm gonna introduce to you about Irving Fisher. Irving Fisher was an American economist, statistician, inventor, eugenicist, and progressive social campaigner. He was one of the earliest American neoclassical economists. In addition, he published several highly successful mathematical textbooks. After suffering tuberculosis as a young man, he became interested in diet and health, and pursued this interest throughout his life, publishing numerous successful books on how to live a healthy and long life. He also suggested a League of Nations to keep the peace long before World War I. Fisher theory of interest. Fisher initially set forth his comprehensive theory of how interest rates are determined in his 1906 book, The Rate of Interest. In 1930, he released the theory of interest and updated and extended version of this theory. Fisher saw two forces interacting to determine the interest rate, which is the impatient rate and the investment opportunity rate. The impatient rate is the extent of the community willingness to obtain present consumption by giving up future consumption. The community value both present and future consumption, and even though it would prefer to have more of both, it is forced by scarcity to trade off future consumption at any moment in time in order to acquire present consumption. The amount of future consumption is willing to sacrifice in exchange for present consumption is determined by how impatient it is. The less impatient it is, the more willing to save and invest and gain future consumption. The more impatient it is, the less willing it is to postpone current consumption in order to gain goods in the future, the less the future consumption. Of course, the greater the society present consumption compared to future, the lower the relative value of present consumption at the margin. If a society has a high percentage of present consumption compared to future, the relative value of increased amount of present consumption is low. Next is the investment opportunity rate. The investment opportunity rate is determined by real factors such as quantity and quality of resources and the state of technology. At one extreme, these resources may be dedicated only to the production of goods for present consumption. At the opposite extreme, society may use all of them to generate capital, resulting in zero present consumption but high future consumption. However, when society moves from the first to the second extreme, marginal returns drop. When people reduce present consumption in order to boost investment and to receive higher future consumption, the rate of return on investment, which is the investment opportunity rate, decrease. In Fisher's words, the more we invest and delay satisfaction, the lower the investment opportunity rate can get, the bigger the impatient rate. But the more we spend and quicken our satisfaction, the lower the impatient rate become, but the greater the opportunity rate. Two things happen when society save and invest. First, less future consumption. As capital returns drop, so does the rate of return on investment. Second, when present consumption decreases and future consumption grows, the relative value of present consumption increases. Simply put, the lower the relative value of present consumption and the greater the marginal rate of return on investment, the less we save and invest as society. The equilibrium interest rate is reached when the rate of return on investment and the rate at which society is willing to trade off present for future consumption are both equal. As a result, the interest rate is determined by society to gain higher future by sacrificing present consumption, as well as society willingness to sacrifice present for future consumption. Some people will choose that lending money at this interest rate is their best interest, while others will choose to borrow money. Fisher pointed out that the observed monetary or nominal interest rate may or may not be equal to this actual rate of interest. The quantity theory of money. Fisher identified 5 determinants, which is the value of currency in circulation, its velocity of circulation, the volume of bank deposits subject to check, its velocity, and the value of trade. Fisher's equation of action is mv plus m prime v prime equal to pt. M is just amount of money in economy at any particular point in time. Money is total of all cash and bank deposit, include all notes and coins as well as money held by banks for people that instantly available for people to spend. V is the velocity of money. The best way to understand is to think of a single dollar bill and how it travels through economy. We start with, we use a single dollar bill to buy a can of water. The store owner used the same dollar to pay his worker. Then the worker used the dollar bill to buy a birthday cake. The cake shop owner, having received the dollar and made profit, then used the dollar to buy some plant, and so it goes on and on. So the point is, same dollar bill is being used more than once. For PT side, T is the quantity of goods and service sold, and P is average level of price. By multiplying PT together, we get the total expenditure in economy. Fisher assumed that M prime has a fixed relationship to M. This is due to 2 factors. First, bank reserves are kept in fixed definite ratio to bank deposit. Second, individual, firm and corporation maintain fairly stable ratio between their currency and deposit balance. When the ratio of M prime to M is slightly disturbed, several sectors immediately want to restore it. Individual will deposit excess money or cash out excess deposit. Transition period of rising or decreasing price will also slightly disturb the relationship between M prime and M. Fisher also had to assume that the velocity of circulation and the volume of trade remain constant in order to define a cause and effect relationship between the quantity of money and the price level. The volume of trade increased in the long run due to changes in population, production, efficiency, and so on. However, in a fully employed economy, the quantity of money in circulation typically determines the price level in the short run. According to Fisher, individuals want to have a certain amount of cash on hand in proportion to their expenses. The growth in the amount of money in the economy disrupts this optimal ratio, causing individuals to rebalance their cash to expenditure ratio by increasing their expenditure. The higher spending increases product price in proportion to the increase of cash in the economy. As a result, there is a direct link between increasing currency and price increase, as seen by Fisher. Monetary policy. Paper money that is not redeemable in gold tends to create public suspicion, to be overused by monetary authorities too easily, to stimulate speculation, and to combat debtor in an inflationary campaign. Fisher supported a method that will make paper money redeemable on demand, not any specific weight, coin, or amount of gold, but in a quantity of gold that will symbolize constant purchasing power. As a result, the purchase power of the dollar will stay unchanged. The more gold in a dollar, the more it can purchase, and the lower the price, and vice versa. According to Fisher's idea, we will first eliminate gold coins in exchange of gold certificate, which is a paper money redeemable in gold bullion. To ensure overall price stability, the government will alter the amount of gold bullion it will offer or accept for a paper dollar. According to the quantity theory of money, if a float of gold enters our circulation from domestic or foreign sources, redundant gold certificate will create a price increase. The quantity of gold certificate will be reduced if the price of gold drops for two reasons. First, individuals will be discouraged from depositing gold with the government, and second, people will trade their paper money for gold. As a result, the amount of currency in circulation will be reduced, and price will be lower. If gold were exported, price will fall as the amount of money in circulation decrease. Following the 1929 crisis, Fisher identified debt increase as the primary cause of deflation and depression. Excessive debt results in liquidation, with goods dumping on the market. Falling price of goods put further pressure on debtors to liquidate their assets. Fisher came to feel that changes in demand deposit are the most significant source of business fluctuation. In other words, he lost the trust in the stability of the currency demand deposit relationship. The most significant benefit of Fisher's policy will be the elimination of large monetary inflation in deflation, thus mitigating economic boom and depression.
Hi, my name is Knut binti Muhammad Najib and my metric number is 271905. I will continue for the neoclassical school, departure from pure competition. Theories of imperfect competition are well within the scope and tradition of marginalist or neoclassical school. For example, Knut developed model of pure monopoly and duopoly as early as 1838, and Edwards and Wicksell analyzed situation in which demand curve faced by competitors were less than perfectly elastic. The interest in imperfect competition arose because of the gap in economic theory of pure models of competition and monopoly, and because the theory of pure competition was becoming increasingly untenable. Competition applied most fully to agriculture, but even that the theory was becoming less suitable to modern conditions than it had in earlier times. According to many economists, the neoclassical theory of pure competition had less direct applicability to modern industrial production and trade than to the agriculture. The methodology of the theories of imperfect competition discussed in this chapter shows all the characteristics of the neoclassical school. It deals with marginalism and the microeconomic approach in an abstract, deductive, and subjective manner, and its economics assume a rational, static, and momentarily unchanging world that tends toward equilibrium. By showing how monopolists can raise the price above the competitive equilibrium level to yield economic profit over the long run, the theories concerning departure from pure competition were influential in creating a greater willingness among economists to accept more vigorous government antitrust policy and government regulation of the profits of utility monopolies. Pure competition as a goal has been replaced by workable competition, which represent a compromise between pure competition and oligopoly. From this addition to the neoclassical theory, we learn that under monopolistic competition, even in the absence of the power to realize the monopoly profit, prices are likely to be higher and output lower than under pure competition. Furthermore, under condition of monopolistic competition and monopsony, the factor of production do not receive return equivalent to the value of their marginal contributions. These new theories thus struck a blow to the widespread idea that a private enterprise system necessarily results in the best allocation of productive resources and necessarily reward all the factors of production appropriately. Our central attention in this assignment will be focused on Chamberlin and Robinson, whose collective contribution was to explore several situations that lie between pure competition and pure monopoly. Edward Hastings Chamberlin was born in La Corne, Washington. He received his undergraduate degree from the University of Iowa. He published his book, The Theory of Monopolistic Competition, in 1933. This important book fused the previously separate theories of monopoly and competition, and it explained a range of market situations that are neither purely competitive nor totally monopolistic. Chamberlin held that most market prices are actually determined by both monopolistic and competitive elements. Each firm's demand curve slopes downward, and therefore its marginal revenue curve must lie below the demand or average revenue curve. Under pure competition, which each firm able to sell all it produces at a going market price, the marginal revenue is equal to price, and the marginal revenue and demand curve are identical horizontal line. If a farmer can sell all bushel of wheat at $5 per bushel, every additional bushel sold adds $5 to total revenue. The situation is quite different in markets in which pure competition does not prevail. For example, if an entrepreneur can sell one pair of shoes per day at a price of $20, two pairs at $18, and three pairs of $16, in each case except the first, the marginal revenue is less than the price. The marginal revenue is $20 for the first pair but only $16 for the second pair. This can be calculated in two ways. Total revenue goes from $20 times 1 to $36, an increase of $16. The additional pair of shoes sell for $18, but the price of the first pair had to reduce $2 in order to sell a second pair. When marginal cost is below than AC, average cost will fall. When marginal cost is greater than AC, average cost will rise. Therefore, the marginal cost will cut the average cost curve at the lowest point. According to the Chamberlin, only where a firm enjoys significant monopoly will its price exceed the average cost in both short and long run. Given demand curve D and marginal revenue curve MR, the monopolistic competitor produce quantity at B, at which MR equivalent to MC, and at which it earns an economic profit of L, M, and S. This economic profit attract new entrants to the industry, which result in a downward shift of the firm demand and marginal revenue curve to D prime and MR prime. In the long run equilibrium, the firm maximizes profit by producing quantity A, earns only a normal profit P equivalent to AC, produce less than the competitive output A rather than C, and charge a price R that exceeds marginal cost and lowers average cost. The result is excess capacity and allocative inefficiency. These Chamberlin models indicate that monopolistic competitor firms offer differentiated product, charge price that exceeds their marginal cost, and operates at level of output at which their average costs are higher than the minimum. Consequently, society's scarce resources are not allocated to their highest value use. There is allocative inefficiency. Society values additional units of the goods that these firms produce more than alternative products that are being produced instead. Also, if these additional units were produced, the average cost of the product would decline. The last part in models, Chamberlin models, the qualification. Many economists have reiterated that pure competition results in larger output, more efficient production, and lower selling price than those that occur under monopolistic competition. But these require two qualifications. The first one is Chamberlin conclusions are built on the unrealistic assumption that cost curves are the same in each situation. Pure competition would not necessarily provide the greatest volume of output and the lowest price. The second one is contemporary economists note that a world of pure competition, with all products being standardized, would be a dull world indeed. Monopolistic competition provides positive benefit associated with a variety of products.
I'm the fifth presenter. My name is Siti Nur Ashikan binti Osman and my metric number is 271846. Joan Robinson was born in 1903 in Surrey, England and died in 1983 at the age of 79 in Cambridge, England. Her full name is Joan Violet Robinson nee Morris and her nationality was British. Her book, The Economist of Imperfect Competition, was published a few months after Chamberlin and covered substantially the same ground in 1933. She expanded her activities and made important contributions to Keynesian and post-Keynesian economic development, and international trade. To the concept of monopolistic competition, Robinson added the idea of monopsony, a situation in which there is either a single buyer in a market or a group of buyers acting as one. So how about the seller? The microeconomic theory of monopsony assumes a single entity to have market power over all sellers as the only purchaser of a good or service. This is a similar power to that of a monopolist, which can influence the price for each buyer in a monopoly. Multiple buyers have only one seller of a good or service available to purchase from. Product market monopsony happens when there are many buyers of a commodity. Their aggregate demand curve slopes downward and to the right. Because it is based on marginal utility, the more unit of a good a person acquires, the lower its marginal utility and the less he or she offers for an additional unit. If there is only a single buyer, or if all the buyers form an agreement to add together, we can assume that the market demand curve remains. We can also assume that the supply curve remains unchanged, because it is indicate how much all the sellers together will offer at each price. The supply price is based on the cost of producing each quantity, and this cost does not change if the presence of a monopsony. Robinson states two generalizations. First is under pure competition. The buyer will purchase successive units of goods at any one time up to the point where the price is equal to marginal utility. And second, under monopsony, the buyer will regulate purchase in such a way that the marginal cost to him, as distinct from the marginal cost of production, is equal to marginal utility. These important propositions are illustrated in Table 1. First, consider pure competition among buyers. Suppose the market price of some hypothetical product X is $4. No single buyer can influence the price regardless of the amount that he purchased. We assume that the marginal utility data in column 5 is for a particular consumer who buy only this good. At any one time, ownership of the first unit of the product provides the consumer $7 of marginal utility. A second unit provides $6 of marginal utility to him, the third unit $5, and fourth unit $4, and so forth. At the market price of $4, the consumer will buy 4 units of the product. That is, he will buy unit of the product up to the point where the price is equal to marginal utility. $4 from column 2 and $4 from column 5. Now suppose the same consumer is the only buyer of product X in this market. Acquiring the first through the fourth unit of the product still provide a marginal utility for him of $7, $6, $5, and $4. Column 5. Assuming that firm can increase the production of the product only under condition of increasing cost, upward sloping market supply, the more unit or consumer wish to buy, the higher will be the price. Because this monopsonist is the sole buyer, he must pay a higher per unit price. If he wishes to buy a large number of units, greater output comes at higher per unit production cost. We see from column 1 and 2 in table 1 that he can buy 1 unit of X for $1, but 2 units would cost him $2 each, for a total cost of $4. As shown in column 4, the marginal cost to him of the second unit is $3. $4 minus 1, rather the simple $2 is the actual price of the second unit. The $3 marginal cost, however, is less than the marginal utility of the second unit $6, and therefore the person will choose to buy it. And observe from the table that this consumer will decide to buy 3 units of the product because at this amount his marginal cost $5 is still equal to his marginal utility $5. We can summarize, under normal condition of an upward sloping product supply curve, the monopsonist will purchase fewer units of a product, 3, than would competitive buyer 4, and will pay a lower than competitive price, 3 as opposed to $4. The monopsonist can control the product price by adjusting the quantity of purchase, much like a monopolistic seller can control the same price by adjusting the level of output. Robinson pointed out that in the presence of a perfectly elastic supply curve, that is, where marginal cost and average cost of production are equal, the supply price will be constant and the quantity purchased under monopsony will be the same as under pure competition. If an industry is working under a discriminatory supply price, the marginal cost to the monopsonist will be less than the price of the commodity. He or she will buy more of the product that would pure competitors. Next, we will continue about resource market monopsony. Following Marshall approach, Robinson declared that an employer short-run labor demand curve is its marginal revenue product curve, MRP. This is true in both monopsonist and competitor labor market. Marginal revenue product is the increase in total revenue to the employer when it's hire an additional worker. It is the extra revenue that the firm gets when it sells the greater output that the added worker help produce. There is pure competition in the sale of the product. Marginal revenue product decline as more workers are hired solely because of the law of discrimination return. Each added worker contribute less to extra output and therefore less to the marginal revenue than did the previously added worker. Robinson also analyzed monopsony in the market for resource using the labor market as an illustration. The contemporary graphical representation of labor market monopsony, Figure 2, derived directly from Robinson on presentation. The monopsonistic employer face a marginal wage cost curve MWC that lie above the market supply curve S. To maximize its profit, it restrict its hiring A rather than B in order to pay a lower than competitive wage R rather than S. According to Robinson, monopsonistic exploitation is NR, the difference between marginal revenue product MRP and the monopsony wage when there is monopoly or monopolistic competition in the product market. The value of the marginal product VMP exceeds MRP and monopoly exploitation is TN. The labor supply curve facing a monopsonist slope upward and to the right. Because the monopsonist is the only employer of a particular type of labor, it faces the market labor supply curve. This curve also indicates the average wage cost AWC because it shows the wage rate that must be paid per worker to attract a particular number of workers. Under monopsony, the marginal wage cost, which is the extra cost associated with employer one more worker, exceeds the average wage cost or wage rate. The monopsonist must increase the wage rate to attract additional workers away from alternative employment, household activity, or leisure, and it must pay this higher wage rate to all of the workers. The extra cost of employing an additional worker is therefore more than the wage rate paid to the worker. It also includes the extra wage paid to workers who could have been attached at the lower wage rate. How many workers will the monopsonist represent in Figure 2 employ? The answer, said Robinson, is A. It is because this is the number of which is the marginal revenue product of the last worker employed just equal the marginal wage cost, point N. In MRP, the greater the MWC, it will be profitable for the firm to hire more workers. If MRP were less than MWC, the employee could add to his profit by reducing employment. The monopsony shown in figure 2 will pay a wage rate of L. As seen by the supply curve, it can attach its profit maximization number of employee A at the wage rate. This model enabled Robinson to draw several interesting conclusions. First, a labor market monopsonist will employ fewer workers than would be hired by employing competitively with one another for worker A rather than B. The monopsonists reduce employment to avoid driving up the wage in must pay to all workers. Second, under the monopsony, the worker is exploited. Robinson cited one definition of exploitation of labor as a factor of production being employed of a wage that is less than one marginal revenue product R rather than N. If the market for labor is perfect, so that each employer can hire all the labor needed at the market wage, the marginal wage cost of labor to the individual employer is equal to the wage rate. The employer will impel by self-interest to hire worker up to the point where the marginal revenue product is equal to the worker wage rate. Exploitation of labor under this definition normally does not occur in a competitive labor market. Robinson cited another definition of exploitation figured by E. C. Pigo that will be mentioned in chapter 20, which is her colleague at Cambridge. Exploitation occurs when the worker wage is less than the value of the marginal product of labor, VMP. The monopolist sale of an additional unit of output does not add the full amount of the product price to the monopolist's marginal revenue. Consequently, the marginal revenue that a firm takes in when it hires an additional worker and sells the result, greater output will be less than the extra output times the price received for those units. The firm will have to sell all units at a lower price, even those could have sold at a higher price had it not hired the extra worker. Marginal revenue product will be marginal product times marginal revenue, not time price. Under this definition, TR in figure 2 measure total exploitation of labor and R measure the exploitation due to monopsony. They ensure the exploitation resulting from monopoly or monopolistic competition in the sale of the product. Exploitation under monopolistic competition can divide by two. First is remedies from exploitation and second, criticism. To remedy exploitation of the labor under monopsony, said Robinson, a trade union or a trade board should impose a minimum wage on the industry. Then the supply of labor to the industry became perfectly elastic at the imposed wage rate, and the marginal wage cost of labor is identical with average wage cost. Referring to figure 2, if a wage rate of S were imposed, the monopsonist would no longer be bidding up the price of labor as he increased employment. The new supply curve would be a horizontal line emanating from the vertical axis and going through point S, and employment from increase from A to B. The wage could equal the marginal revenue product, and product exploitation from monopsony should disappear. The Pigo-Robinson define of exploitation apply only the pure competition in the sale of the product, because it is impossible under the market condition for all factors to get the value of the marginal product or record of adding a problem. According to Pigo-Robinson view, all factors are exploited and employee could avoid the change of exploitation only by going into bankruptcy.
As for the conclusion part, we'll be discussing the contributions of the economist. Number 1, the contribution and explanation of Hastings Chamberlin to imperfect competition theory. So the first contribution is the theory of monopolistic competition 1933, and it says that not an issue with Marshall's laws of return, but a response to the existence of advertising and product differentiation. And he did mention that firms have monopoly over their own brands, but there are many close substitutes. Secondly, the contribution explanation of Joan Robinson to imperfect competition theory. The contribution is the economics of imperfect competition 1933, and also the introduction of marginal revenue curves. He mentioned that individual firm, assuming the firm has its own market and faces a downward sloping demand curve. In the absence of new entry, the analysis is as for a monopoly. The third one is the contribution and explanation of John Grustav, Knut Wicksell, to monetary economics. The first one is monetary theory, that's the contribution, and he did discuss the imperfect competition, sticky prices, natural and bank rates of interest, and also monetary equilibrium. He also anticipates gains in many areas and not purely a quantity theorist. Lastly is the contribution and explanation of Irving Fisher to monetary economics. The first one is monetary theory and monetary policy. Secondly is the quantity theory and theory of monetary disturbances, and in the absence of new entry, the analysis is as for a monopoly. That's all from me. Thank you so much.